Well, thank you, Joel. Good to see a number of people in the audience. Beautiful day outside, so hopefully we got some information here I think will be valuable. And as you know, this is a topic that in the last 2 or 3 years is getting a lot of discussion, interest, questions, and so on and so forth. So we really have a panel here of 3 people. One is a nutritionist that works in Wisconsin. We have also a nutritionist in this area and then a farmer producer. So what I'm going to do is briefly introduce all 3 right now, and then we'll move into the presentations. Once the presentations are over, then we'll open it up for questions from the audience to the panel members. So the first speaker is Michelle Woodman, who currently is a dairy nutrition consultant with Landmark Services Corporation, and she's working right now in southwestern Wisconsin. She grew up in a dairy farm in Wisconsin, got a bachelor's at University of Wisconsin-Platteville, master's at Washington State. Spent a little time in the northern part of Wisconsin, and then about 10 years ago moved back to southwestern. And she's worked with a number of herds for clients and so on that have used Shredlage as part of their operation. We also have Corwin Holtz with us today. Many of you know Corwin. He grew up in California. He did come east, worked with us at Cornell for a period of time, and now he's a partner in the Holtz Nelson Consulting Group. They have about 5 individuals working, and they're working on herds all the way from Maine down to north of Pennsylvania. And they work with quite a few herds. And again, he's got, I think, 3 or 4 herds that have some experience with Shredlage that he'll be talking about. And then the last speaker is Cliff Hanahan from Hanahan Family Farms. Cliff's located around Saratoga Springs. They also have a satellite dairy in Mount Upton. And it's interesting because there's 3 brothers and about 4 nephews involved in these 2 different operations. And they made a decision a while back to go with Shredlage on both farms. And I think Cliff will tell you a little bit about how they went through that decision-making process and what their reactions are, what they found. And I think the information we have, Cliff has probably more questions still, but hopefully he has a few answers for us. So that's sort of the format. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she's going to go through a little presentation of some of the information she's aware of, some of the things she's observed, and point out a little bit of the research data that's recently become available. Michelle?
First of all, I'd like to thank Pro Dairy and Fair Business Magazine for having this opportunity. As Larry said, I'm from Wisconsin, next to Southwest Corner, halfway between Madison and La Crosse. And I did have a spurt for 5 years up in the Green Bay corridor, lots of big dairy territory for 5 years after I got out of graduate school. As far as Shredlage, I've been using Shredlage for pretty much since it started, 3 years. I had 2 of the prototype herds, actually were 2 of the herds I work with, and altogether it's about 6,000 cows. As far as Shredlage itself, before I get into more of the specifics, I first would like to talk a little bit about the evolution, I guess, of feeding corn silage. Corn silage feeding obviously has changed tremendously in the last 20, 30 years. Granted, I wasn't feeding cows in the 80s. I was mixing feed for my parents, though. In the 80s, production was a lot lower than it is today. At that point in time, we looked at a few ingredients when balancing ratios: crude protein, ADF, TDN, calcium, and phosphorus. Typically, when they sampled forages on the farm, it was either hay or haylage. Really, they considered corn silage to be pretty much the same. And if they did put corn silage in the diet, it was either, again, pretty basic, 8% crude protein, 28 ADF, and 70% TDN, and moisture adjusted for that. Also, a few varieties were out at the time, not too many. And as far as the corn silage was actually harvested, it tended to be the cornfields that didn't make good grain. Now, fast forward now to 2014. Obviously, production levels are a lot higher than they used to do. And the computer technologies and the advancements in sampling, as far as feed systems on farms, and balancing models have changed tremendously. There's numerous varieties out there as far as have been tested, researched, and now used. And as far as corn silage specifics, we look more at the nutrient specifics, and corn silage has become a huge player in our diets, at least so in the Midwest. As far as corn silage itself, we look at different nutrient makeups and specific things, more so than we did used to. We look at the fiber portion, and then we look at the starch portion. As far as the fiber portion, NDF digestibility is huge, and this definitely can vary between variety, growing conditions, and health of the plant. We also look at moisture content, as far as maximizing the digestibility of that plant, ideally over 65%, would be in the perfect world. As far as chop length, we look at physical effective NDF, and we do so as nutritionists monitoring through shaker boxes and stuff like that. And the percent of the ration. As far as we look at the shaker box, we look at the length, and then as far as the percent of corn silage in our diet. So with your more conventional corn silages, obviously the shaker box on top is a little shorter than what say your shredlage would be. So things to consider. On the grain side of things, 50% of the corn silage on dry matter basis is of that grain. We consider the sources of the starches we use, what we put on the diet, and also the point of digestion as far as the degree of processing. Is it digested in the intestine or would be in the rumen? Now, besides looking at those different traits within corn silage, we also look at different varieties as far as to improve the performance of our animals. When looking at different varieties, hybrid, you look at a hybrid that will allow me to harvest when we want in the pocket we would, with moisture of 64 to 66%. We look at good health traits. Are they adaptable to my soil conditions or environment, and also with the proper heat units and degree days. Now, despite the best scenario or best fit we try to make for our dairy, we know how the tail of two hybrids can tend to go. We have two hybrids grown in the same soil, side by side, same fertilizer program, the harvest at the same stage, moisture is very similar, and starch content is also very similar. And then what could be our end result? Hybrid 1 versus hybrid 2. As you can see, moisture is relatively the same. Starches vary about 2%. NDF digestibility 30 hour, that's about 3% difference, or 3-point difference. And then you can see the variation between bulbs and yeast. Milk per ton, it varied by 2. Now, take into account that milk per ton actually doesn't take in that NDF digestibility number, so is it truly a 5 or 6? So along came the origination of the concept of shredlage. How can we find a process that would overcome the variation in digestibility, moisture, and variety of the corn silage? And so a lot of work, and still do a good job of processing both the fiber and the grain portions. Now along came the idea of shredlage. Shredlage actually is a longitudinally ripping of the forage portion. In other words, making more surface area for the room bugs. Stock pieces are about the size of the alfalfa stem, and I'll show you some pictures later on that I have. Smashed corn kernels. I will have to say, most of my shredlage I work with, it's honestly hard to find the corn when you're going to look at the piles and bunkers. It's that smashed. And it does have a consistency of fluffiness, for lack of a better term. But the nice thing is the flexibility as far as how you can make it. There's a lot of different ways. This is just a picture I took, some work we did with BW Madison, and just visual difference between the shredlage, which would be on your left, and the traditional corn silage process on the right. And like I said, you can see the fiber length and kind of the fluffiness to it too, by looking at the picture. Second is the picture, a difference between the kernel processing. And you can see on the left the difference, your left, and see on the difference as far as the processing in itself. Now on shaker box results, I just showed a variety here. Ideally, in a perfect world, if you have a 60% or above shredlage. And I have looked out a few there. I have looked out as far as being able to do it at that 30 millimeter TLC, theoretical length of cut. That would be the top one at the 35% on the top screen. However, this past year, most of my producers did it at 22, just because of the nature of the crop. It was a dry year, and the size of the stalk and the disability, we had to make that shorter. And then I just did a comparison of the 17 TLC with the conventional kernel processing, just the percent on the top of the shaker box. This is a picture, like I said, with the 30. And to be honest, I really didn't have any of it this year. When we first started the prototype, we were able to do some shredlage at this length. Now, before I move on, let's switch that over. A lot of people ask, as far as a method that they can use on farm to evaluate how well they're processing their corn silage, especially shredlage. In the past, I have, and I'm sure many other producers of mine have too. I've used the Pioneer Cup method. This is relatively new. Actually, they're getting manufactured right now. Roger Olson and the Shredlage LLC came up with these cups that they're going to ship out for people that need them, etc. And then also a harvesting guide for producers to go along with it. And with the, this is the first page of this on the front would be the guide. And the first would show you the differences on the kernel, what it should look like, with the shredder versus what it should not look like. On the other side, you'll see all the stalk pieces. What they consider them when they shred them, they call them planks and slivers. So, along with the the planks and slivers. Also, they want to make sure that you don't have any of the pieces that would be bigger than a pencil, and also not a lot of thickness to it. They're going to be pretty flat. As far as some recommendations they're going to have, there's going to be a cup that comes with it. And in the back of the cup, I wish I had a picture to show you, but in the back of the cup they have narrow slots. And those narrow slots, as far as the pieces of corn silage, as far as the planks and the slivers need to fit through those slots. If they do not fit through those slots, then you need to tack the rolls down. Also in the cup, there's going to be a larger circle on there, and that would be to watch the pieces of the stalk that are above the ear. I call them like those cigarette butt pieces. As far as to make sure that they can fit through that slot. Again, it's all just eye tool, and it's something that you need to monitor as far as through the processing, harvesting process, and continue to monitor. But I guess long story short, as far as with shredlage, the wider it is, the longer the cut, the wider the gap, typically. And then the drier it is, the shorter the cut, and then the more narrow the gap is in general. Another common question people ask, how does it pack? For the most part, I would say it packs just as well, if not better. And the reasoning truly behind it, we're not 100% sure. But as far as the dimensional shape of the stalk itself and your more conventional corn silage, it's more three-dimensional, and the feeling with the shredlage, it's more flat, like I said, with the slivers and the planks, and they're able to pack it better, they feel. I know at UW-Madison, Dr. Brian Holmes did some research as far as looking at different packing densities. There wasn't any significant or statistical, I would say, improvement. However, there was a numerical advantage for doing so. The next slide is just a variety of different data gathered from different areas of Wisconsin on clunker densities on the shredlage and then just regular conventional. And on the column here, you'll see the different clunker densities, and then on the bottom, there's the different individual samples. And as you can tell, on average, shredlage performed better, actually, in the packing densities than more than conventional did overall. Now, we talked about as far as the processing of the corn silage. I guess now I want to dig in a little more on the nutritional side of things. And that would include the increased fiber digestibility and also the physical effective NDF. Now, as we know, Mother Nature is king of digestibility, no matter what we may do. I pulled some information from a recent article in the Hordes Dairyman in November 2013 by Dr. John Gazer from Rock River. And in the Midwest, and for certain, and somewhat across the Midwest, I've heard Eastern too, digestibilities were horrendous this past year. I mean, we had 10 to 15 points less on the digestibility side. And that being said, that's 4 to 5 pounds an hour. Now, Shredlage was useful in some of those cases for certain. And maybe Shredlage is in that way even better for a situation with lower digestible corn silage. I will say in the herds that I do feed Shredlage with, I did not see the drop in milk. Not saying I set the world on fire, but I definitely maintained what I had last year. Compared to the herds that I didn't have Shredlage with, it did make a difference. This is just notation of the article where I pulled some information from, again, verifying the different digestibilities in the corn silage. What I wanted to specifically bring up were the bottom 2 graphs, just to show across the nation from the information he gathered, as far as it was pretty a common trend as far as the total tract digestibility being poor across the U.S., obviously allowing less energy for the cows to use. I guess on the eastern side, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, as far as what they were showing as far as the levels in the starch were lower than they had been in the past. And then on the western side of the state, it appeared as far as the grain portion was better, but the digestibility was worse. Now this would be, again, some UW work as far as from the first trial they did in 2012, where they looked at the digestibility of the typical conventional corn silage, processed corn silage, and the Shredlage. And you can see there's almost 11% improvement upon fiber digestibility with the Shredlage. And granted, this was the first trial from 2012. Now, we asked the question, why does this happen? To be honest, I don't know if they have a complete answer. Obviously, more research needs to be done. Hence, more people need to try it and see how things work. Again, they feel that strongly that most likely is we do because one, to increase ripping of forages, making more room or more surface area for the rumen bugs to attach. Also, I mean, pretty much looking at it, it does look like the actual material you'd find in the rumen mat in a dairy cow. So again, not 100% answer why, but we're definitely seeing that it works that way. And that's what we're speculating as far as that. Yes. I'll talk a little bit about that but I've done the diets because of that. And the physical effective NDF of the Shredlage, again, kind of the same concept you're talking about too. It's been excellent in the diets I've worked with as far as milk component production, such as that. But because of the length of the cut of the corn silage and the physical effective NDF, I've been able, typically I've used straw in a lot of my conventional corn silage diets before I had Shredlage. And I do feed a lot of corn silage. Mine tend to be 70%. With the conventional, I did that. So always the particle length was kind of on the borderline, I won't lie, as far as where it should be in a shaker box. So a lot of times I fed it half a pound of straw. But with the Shredlage, I've been able to take that out because now I do have the length for the rumen mat, and that's worked well. I know some people that use the dry hay have been able to replace the Shredlage or the dry hay because they use Shredlage, and even maybe looked at running that percentage of corn silage higher than they would have in the past for fear of the length of the cut of their shaker of the mix. So I'm going to touch base a little bit about the processing scores. This slide is kind of just a collaboration of a bunch of processing things they've done in the past years as far as the Shredlage group with the help of some nutritionists across the state. In 2012, most of the samples they took turned out extremely well at the processing score. Ideally, with Shredlage, you'd like a processing score of 70 or above. That's what I shoot for. Most of them came back at a 75, so really good by standards. They just did make a note of it though, that the corn kernels tended to be a lot harder that year. And I'm only bringing that up because now in 2013, when they did a lot of the processing scores, they weren't nearly as good. And we got a feeling, and like I said, for lack of a better term, we put like the corn almost formed these little kind of like ball-shaped forms. Not very scientific, but as far as, and I'm wondering if that did skew with the processing score, because they definitely came back lower, but I mean, 2013, as far as search availability, was really good. So, the third thing is just fresh chopped versus fermented. And there's a variety of different things they did on this, but long story short, they suggested not even to do the processing score on fresh silage. The results were just so inconsistent across the board. So we definitely suggest doing it with more fermented feeds. And lastly, I just brought up the breader processing score, kind of after the point I said about 2012 versus 2013. Definitely Shredlage did shine as far as on the corn processing side of things with the drier corn. The one sample I'm going to show next is actually, they harvested like 54% dry matter, if I remember correctly. And we got a 90 on the processing score. So it did, when it gets that dry, you tighten those rolls as tight as you can, and it really does tear that stuff apart really well. And that's just the sample I talked about, the 90% processing score. Now this slide takes a combination starch disappearance and then the processing score itself. Two samples here. One would be the, again, Shredlage, which had a processing score of 81. And then the regular kernel processing is at 64. And you can see the difference between the disappearance of the starch between the two samples. It's quite significant. Now, as far as the Shredlage impact on diets, these next couple slides are just a scenario that we put together. We took one of my coworkers' herds, their 85-pound herd, 2 times a day, and we replaced 20 pounds dry matter of the conventional corn silage with the Shredlage. And our goal here was not to make more milk. We wanted to sustain more milk just by replacing it and try to cut costs. And when we did this is 2013, late 2013, we did this scenario, just so you know market-wise where we're looking at. And we were able to take 34 cents out. We replaced some soy hulls, definitely some energy source as far as cornstarch. And the two things I guess we found out, and we definitely did maintain 85 pounds of milk. The two things were the NDF, you'll see, was definitely higher just in the Shredlage. We're able to keep, push that animal harder, but still have the rumen-mat, and then also the fiber digestibility number was a little higher with the Shredlage also.
That's conventional silage instead of processed silage?
Yeah, one was conventional, and originally they were conventional, and then we did just do 2 diets and just did the flip-flop. Like I said, it was just kind of a trial, kind of a situation where we weren't striving to get 95, just flip-flopping and seeing where we could get it, see how much money we could save and still maintain milk. No. Again, this is just pointing out where my NDF was at, as far as right here, the 30 from the 29, and then as far as the fiber digestibility number 5 versus 4.7. You'll notice it also made more metabolizable protein too. And again, this is just to prove how it all matched 85 pounds across the board, and metabolizable protein, and lysine, methionine, and then on our energy. So it was all 85. Now, as far as what the cows think, I guess, and we had that discussion before this with the other speaker here, as far as dryness, I guess I've looked out as far as my customers capturing the corn silage season in the right pocket with the shredder. So I honestly have not had any problems with sorting. And you'll find as long as you don't get in that 40-50 TLC range, you're doing really well. To be honest, I had to retrain my eyes as far as when I go to look at these herds and do the shaker box, because it looks a lot different than I had traditionally been used to with the regular conventional corn silage. Like I said, I've seen a definite increase with the effective fiber rate. So I was able to pull my straw, not seeing any detriment to any extent by doing that. And as far as disability, again, it's one of those you can't necessarily prove, but for what I'm seeing in the cows, it definitely is falling along the lines of that. When I do screens and manure and I look at the fiber passing through and how the length of it and how she's digesting it, it looks exceptional. So I definitely have had good luck with that. All right, what I'm going to review next would be some of the latest information from Dr. Shaver. They just came out with this a couple weeks ago at ASA, I believe. And the first trial I'm going to show is the flip slide. The first trial they did back in 2012. The recent one they just did from January to May. Again, the first slide was more just basic information what they saw in the first trial. As far as overall general consensus, it was definitely a trend for increased milk production, nothing significant. The catch of this trial is they actually ran out of shredlage. So it wasn't nearly as long as they wanted to, so it definitely was in the works that we have to do another one very soon. The one they just got done with had 120 animals on it and 3 different diets per se. One was BMR shredlage. The second was your conventional processed corn silage. The third was the conventional processed corn silage plus 10 pounds of hay. I will make a note. I know the haylage they used in this diet for all of the animals was very subpar, very smelly, butyric-like. So keep that in mind when you're seeing the results too. But everybody got that. They were lucky. On this slide, I guess just to show you the brand they used as far as the BMR, and then the bottom 2 points were both the gloss and the exact same machine. And the difference was, the 2 millimeter roll gap for the conventional and the 19 TLC, and then for the shredlage they went up to that 26. This would just be the diet. Again, reiterating that they kept it very similar. I mean, it's exactly the same for all the different diets except for the shredlage versus the conventional processed corn silage, and then the last one, 10 pounds of dry hay in it. And as you can see on the bottom, crude protein, ether extract, NDF, forage NDF, and starch, all the same. This would be some of the processing scores they did for the different samples they did throughout the trial. And you can see the ranges, especially on the shredlage. The processing score averaged around 72.4, if I remember correctly, and then the conventional was like a 67.6. So definitely saw advantage on the processing score. And also, if you look at the ranges, there's a lot smaller range in the shredlage processed corn silage. This would be on the dry matter intake and the milk yield. Dry matter intake is a little higher for the shredlage, however not significant. But you can tell in the milk response, we definitely had a significant response when we went from 104 to 110 and almost 113 on the side of the shredlage diet. This would be milk by week by treatment, and again, just showing how the milk trended and more of a wider gap between the shredlage and the conventional shredlage. You obviously can see the one with 10 pounds of hay, really died. It did not do so well. This is just a quick clip from the first trial I wanted to show as far as the common trend. However, it was not significant, like I said, but 2 of those trials they did definitely had the same trend. Another trial they did was at Dort College in Iowa. Again, they saw the exact same trend as these 2, and if any more so of a gap. So very similar results. What everybody wants to see is private economics. Across the top, you'll see the different prices per cow per day for the different diets. I will make a note, it's a common question. They added $2 on top of the harvesting price for charge on the shredlage, and you'll see that price is in there, and they average about 16 cents. So, and then no matter that, you go down and you can see the income over feed cost was over 20 20 cents, despite that added $2 charge on the harvesting of the shredlage. Now, again, a question I get asked quite a bit as far as the value of shredlage. To the producer and to the animal, it's invaluable. I mean, it's worked very well for me. As far as on the side of the custom guy, or the custom guy that wants to charge for it, that's something you almost got to sit down and pencil. I think there's a lot of variations. I mean, did they buy a new chopper, or did they retrofit their old chopper? I mean, that's kind of up in the air. I guess in general, Wisconsin, it's about $1. Is what I've been hearing across the board. So they just threw 2 on there. Don't know why. That's what they decided to do. I guess overall, what we've learned about shredlage, I guess as far as a nutritionist, I am very excited about the flexibility of it. You might come into a year where you do have a subpar product, and it might not be perfect by the time you're done. With the shredder, I feel like we can make it more of a respectable feed to a certain extent. So the flexibility as far as a nutritionist looking at it is fantastic. The dairy farm side of it works at the cow level. I definitely have seen some milk improvement. And like I said, with the past digestibility of the forrages I've used this past year, I maintained for sure in the herds that I use shredlage. As far as the other herds, I got close, but I definitely added cost to the diet to get where I needed to be. So I did see a definite difference in those the corn salads this year in my diet. As far as the rolls, back to that again, it's definitely keeping a close eye on that during the harvesting. It's not you just set it and be done. It's kind of like when you're doing regular corn silage. You really need to monitor that because you can have some issues. Just out prospecting on some other herds that I don't do back home, I saw a lot of issues with that. They just did not tighten the rolls, and they were not too pleased with what they had for the end result, with the crop being so dry like it was this year. And then, feeding corn, the shredlage, like I said, is by no means been an issue. My highest ration I have is about 82% right now, corn silage, and it would be shredlage. One other note I might add on the producer side of things was the reliability. I will have to say nothing is more frustrating, and you all know that, is in the middle of harvest when things are breaking down, which tends to happen. But I will have to say that with the shredder, I don't know if it's luck, but they've done very well as far as not having those problems. So I would have to put a feather in their hat for that as far as reliability has been fantastic. So with that, that's it. Any questions? Yes. I did. Oh, sorry. He asked if there's an advantage of using shredlage on BMR. I do have a dairy that uses 100% BMR, and I have seen the difference for sure. I know, like we talked about earlier, corn was about that dries quick. So it's definitely you have to be on top of it as far as shredlage is not a cure-all, and like we talked about with moisture. I mean, it definitely will help on the kernel processing, but I guess on the stalk portion, BMR, at least RM2, tends to dry a lot quicker. So if people wait a little too long, it's still going to be just have as many issues as it would with your regular processing. But I definitely see advantage with BMR too. Oh, that's it without the shredder too. I mean, it was a shredder. It's key. I mean, key would be for a shredder be between that 66 and 68%, I would say.
Okay, I think what we'll do is hold additional questions till after the other 2 panelists. Let's thank Michelle for her presentation. So next we're going to have Corwin Holtz relate some of his experiences as he worked with some birds.
We good now? Okay. So a little background. I have 3 herds this year, first time Shredlage users. Going to focus in particular on 1 herd as I go through some numbers and all. But just kind of set the premise here. I took a tour with several clients out to Wisconsin a year and a half ago to learn about Shredlage. I've been reading about it, seeing all these articles, hearing about it. So we went out and visited herds. Actually, a couple of them were herds that Michelle feeds. And my guys want to feed more corn silage, 4 tons per acre, harvest at one time, more mega cows of energy per acre. If they had their druthers and you didn't have soil types and erosion and all that, I think most of them would give up haylage if they could. We know that's not a reality, but they want to feed higher corn silage diets. Michelle did a nice job of going through, all the things we've learned over the years as far as fiber digestion, increasing that. So what more can we do with corn silage? And then Shredlage came along. One of the questions I think is, we feed these high corn silage diets, can we get more ruminally effective fiber? I'll discuss that and my thoughts on that here in a little more detail. So Michelle showed you a similar slide here. How should it look? At the top of the list, other consultants I talked to in the Midwest, consultants here in the East that are working with Shredlage, the kernel processing is at the top of the list. Okay? That is where Shredlage has shined relative to what we've been accustomed to. You got to remember that Shredlage is a brand. Okay? It's nothing more than a company that put together a unit that does a very good job of processing, but also the way they've designed that mechanically, you can lengthen out the chop length along with getting that superb processing. If you can get superb processing with a regular kernel processor, that's what you need to do. That's first and foremost, in my opinion. Then we can talk about the extra length, the shredding action and all that. But processing, regardless of the processor that is in a unit, is number 1. This whole physically effective NDF, cud chewing, etc. Michelle got into that a little bit with you. That's still open to question and debate from a science standpoint. Okay? My clients tell me their cows have never been healthy. They've never seen cows chew their cud like they do since we've been on Shredlage diets. Okay? That's what we're seeing in the field. I agree with Michelle's comments on consistency of manure and those types of things. But science-wise, are we getting more physically effective NDF? Is it increasing fiber digestibility? That's still up for debate from a true science standpoint. I believe the cows are telling us we are getting an advantage, and I think Michelle is seeing that in her herds. But I think it's still an area that we're looking for more data to really give us some better answers. If you look at the distribution, these are Cumberland Valley lab samples from 2012 and 2013. You see about 13% inadequately processed, what's classified as optimally processed, up over 70%, about a little over a third of the samples, and the rest just adequately. And for many years, this is where this adequately processed is where most of our processing scores have tended to fall. Now, some interesting data were put on a table here from Cumberland Valley. Here from 2006 to 2013, you can see the percent of optimum processing has gone up dramatically, and percent of poor has dropped quite a bit. This isn't all due to Shredlage, okay? There are a few Shredlage samples in here. It's due to the fact, I believe, that us nutritionists have been pounding on all you guys to process your corn silage better. And the units have gotten better, the machinery's gotten better, and we've gotten this increase in processing scores. But the shredlage unit, though, in my mind, and the data that I've seen, puts the odds very much in your favor of getting those optimum processing scores. Not that it can't be done with other processors, because it can, but the shredlage has certainly delivered the results on a very consistent basis. Similar to what Michelle showed here, top screen 15 to 25%, middle screen 55 to 60%. Most of my top screens on a 3-screen Penn State shaker box have been running 14 to 18%. It's very noticeable, the length difference, and those have been chopped, primarily for my clients, been chopped at 26 to 28 millimeters in length. That's just a hair over an inch theoretical cut versus your standard 3/4 inch cut at 17 to 19 millimeters. Okay, so we've gone from a theoretical with the shredlage units of basically 3/4 of an inch to an inch or a little bit more than an inch. Very much in agreement that moisture level is still key. I think one of the things that I maybe point my finger at the shredlage people with some of their early recommendations were that, well, you let that crop get a little bit more mature, get some more starch out of it, and then all of a sudden we end up with 40% dry matter type material. If that's cut too long with the shredlage units, you're going to get some sorting. The word I hear from some people that have had the 40% or drier shredlage cut at 26 to 30 millimeter cuts, that's where they're running into some sorting issues. My recommendation for my clients as we go into this next crop year is going to be right where Michelle was, in that 32 to 34, 35% dry matter range for shredlage. I don't see us changing from our conventional moisture dry matter levels. Impact on density, I'll show you some slides here in a few minutes. I firmly believe that the opportunity and data that I've seen and what my clients' farms are showing, we are getting better at packing density. And it goes back to just the very nature of shredlage. You've opened up this material, you're able to get the air out of there. Okay, you get those cigarette butts, they're just a sponge. You just can't get them packed, you can't get the air out. So just the physical nature of that shredding action that I believe is letting us get anywhere from 1, and I'm hearing as much as 2 pounds of dry matter per cubic foot increased packing densities. Roll settings, pretty much what my clients and other consultants I talk to in the Midwest, depending on dry matter, get the processing scores that we're looking at, we're somewhere between 1.5 and no more than 2.2 millimeters on those rolls. I'd say most of what I hear is 1.5 to 2. So, I work with Cliff Hanahan will be up here next. I do the nutrition work for the satellite farm of the Hanahan family. David King, my colleague back here, does the home farm where Cliff's at. And one of Cliff's nephews, we took this trip to Wisconsin a year and a half ago to visit some farms. And basically we walked away with 2 things that we heard from those farms, just from a performance and economic standpoint. 2 pounds of milk, take out a pound of cornmeal. I mean, that was just a consistent message that we heard as we visited these farms. 2 pounds of milk, 1 pound of cornmeal. So we did a little partial budget. The Hanahans are conservative. They want to make sure things are going to work. So we did a half pound of cornmeal. We did 1 pound of milk. This is 620 cows through the parlor. We didn't have any straw in this diet to begin with, so there was no savings there. And then I also put 1 more pound of dry matter corn silage into that diet and pulled out a pound of dry matter haylage. Our samples have been running 71 to 75% processing scores. Theoretical cut was somewhere in the 26 to 28 range. The other thing we did on this herd that really excited me is this herd has put up snaplage for the last few years, high moisture ear corn. By far the best high moisture ear corn in terms of processing that I've ever fed. Went through the snaplage, or went through the shredlage unit, and just did a fantastic job of processing. So we replaced 1.06 pounds of cornmeal, $180 a ton. I got to 1 pound of cornmeal because I put more corn silage in the diet. So that saved us 9.5 cents. Rather than 2 pounds of milk, we assumed 1 pound of milk response, 22 cents. I had to take out a little bit of cost for adding some protein because I replaced corn silage for haylage. The net on that, just a very simple partial budget, was $65,000 gross income for a $29,000 unit. That wasn't the only thing that made the decision for the Hanahans to go with a shredlage unit, and I'll let Cliff address that in more depth and detail. But just from a simple partial budget, this was kind of a no-brainer. It made a lot of sense to at least take a serious look at making the change. Have we gotten our pound of milk? We got that and then some. As Michelle alluded to, in a very poor corn silage fiber digestibility year, this is the best this herd has ever milked. The last few months, 3X, no BST, been 92 to 93 pounds shipped out of the tank. First few days here of August, we've been close to 94, 95. Okay. The cows responded when we went to shredlage, no question about it. Haven't gone in depth and detail, analyzing exactly where we were to where we are now, but there is no question that we got a pound of milk and more in a poor fiber digestibility corn silage year. What does it mean to me? I get more of my room and available starch out of corn silage. I'm running these diets at 1 to 1.5% less starch than what I would have in a conventional processed corn silage scenario. Allows me to get starch from homegrown feed sources. Allows me to decrease my non-nutritional effective fiber, straw or hay. If I had that in diets before, I have pulled that out in the other herds that did have straw or hay in them. And we're getting better packing, I believe, in our bunkers. To give you an idea, this is some recent numbers that we had taken. Anytime you can get above 17 for packing density, you've done well. And this last year crop with the shredlage, we're easily 19 to 20 in this corn silage pile. Packing was phenomenal. This has been running 34, 35% dry matter material is what we have been feeding. And just to put that into a temperature perspective, this is with a thermal camera, just very, very cool feed across that face as a result of that excellent bunker management and packing that had occurred. One last thing I'm going to show you before we get Cliff up here. Just going to go through some numbers that David put together for the home farm. We want to look at a digestible starch number. Okay, what's available starch-wise in a rumen? If you go back to David's numbers back in 2012, 26 pounds of dry matter corn silage and a 56% kernel processing score. That was 8.68 pounds of starch from corn silage. But when you put the processing score on it, what David's titling rumen fermentable digestible starch, we get 4.86 pounds of digested starch from that corn silage. 2013, 23 pounds of dry matter because they had a lot of haylage they wanted to get fed. At 38% starch, 8.74, so not much different total starch coming from corn silage. They've got an 80% kernel processing score. We've got over 2 pounds more rumen available, digestible, however you want to, what term you want to put on it, available for rumen microbial activity versus a lower processing score scenario. Huge difference in terms of the amount of outside purchased cornmeal or other corn sources you've got to be putting in that diet to get rumen fermentation and function from a starch standpoint where you'd like to have it. So with that, I think we'll just go right to Cliff and we'll answer or take questions afterwards.
Can you all hear me all right? Still morning, I guess. Good morning. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the practical side of, we've been through the nutrition side and everything else. So I just want to tell you about the practical side. Okay. Is that better? All right. Go through the practical side of what we did. So Shredlage is this new technology that's coming out of Wisconsin. So we decided we needed to do some research. As Corwin said, one of my nephews went with Corwin out to Wisconsin, went through all the numbers, looked at a bunch of herds, looked at the forages being fed, looked at the refusals, and were very impressed. So we had internal family discussions. Both farms, we own box choppers on both farms. The two farms are 140 miles apart. Basically about 700 mature cows on both dairies. So did the internal discussion about what we thought, and this made sense to us. And a lot of decisions you have to do. You get the best technology that you can, and then you just think, does this make sense to you? And so it made sense to us to hopefully better utilize the forage, the corn silage forage we had, because we see what happens on the other end of the cow, and a lot of times you screen the manure and you see these corn pieces coming through. And with the shredlage, we understood that that was mostly gone. And then we physically look at the corn silage being fed on the front end, and it looks a lot different than conventional processed corn. And then you start looking at the kernel processing scores. Our goal was, to get that 80%. And so we talked about the cost. They're about $30,000 a unit. And we were trying to feed more forage. Traditionally, we feed 60 to 63% forage diets, which are what we conservatively say are relatively high forage diets. And we thought, the shredlage would help us to maybe increase the amount of forage being fed. So we decided to make a decision to do it. We bought them from both farms. We had it installed. And one of the things, Michelle, you said, the shredlage units have been really good. Well, I think part of that may be the fact that they're really new. So after we get a few more years on these units, there's going to be wear and tear on them. So that's something we're really going to make sure we do the maintenance on them. So we have a 900 class on the Mount Upton dairy, and we have an 870 class in Saratoga Springs. The 900 is more horsepower. So we did 2 processors in, and our truck drivers automatically started complaining that they're down a gear and that we're going too slow. So one of my nephews got online and ordered the chip. It's $2,500 for a chip. So we chipped our chopper, gave us another 100 horsepower, and we're able to get back to our normal forward speed. So that's one thing you need to consider is you're doing more work. You're going to burn more fuel to get this process done. So put the new chip in, and we started chopping. And what we had done, we listened to some of the discussions in Wisconsin about ideal moisture, and we were thinking we're going to let the plant get a little drier, hopefully get closer to physiological maturity, and capture more of that starch. We thought we have now the technology to pulverize that kernel and make it available to the cows rumen. So we let ours get a little drier. My nephew's different growing season, different growing conditions. And so our corn was a little drier, and we started chopping it at 28 millimeters, and it was kind of ratty. It really didn't look like what we thought it would. So a lot of conversations with Dave King, our nutritionist, talking to the guys in Wisconsin. We decided to go to 22 millimeter. And that looked like kind of the product we wanted to do. The other farm, they cut it at 28. There were a little more moisture there. So they've been very satisfied. We've been very satisfied. So it goes back to what Michelle and Corwin had said. If it's drier, you gotta cut it, you gotta chop it shorter. So we've done that. As far as practical results on our dairy, it was feeding very well. We were making more milk than we had made, and we made a couple of management changes over the year, and so they're doing very well. And then we started 3X in the end of February, and the cows just continue to outperform our expectations. So it's really hard for us to measure last year versus this year because we did do the change in 3X. But on the other dairy, they're 3X right along, and their production took an incremental increase as well. So both dairies right now, like Corwin said, we're honestly 93 to 95 pounds a day, 3X, no BST. So it's feeding very well. I did quiz my nephews again this morning before I came, and I said, what is your take-home message on feeding Shredlage? And they said, healthy cows, lots of rumination, and the production is really, really good. So I agree with that. I think for us, it's been a wise investment. As far as the fiber digestibility, that's really difficult for me to measure. And so, I rely on the people that are doing the research, and it makes sense to me to shred that stalk. You've got a round cigarette-shaped piece. That's not very available for the rumen bacteria to digest. It's also very difficult to pack that, like we talked about. That's kind of like a little sponge, and when you shred that open, it looks like a different. It looks like a different thing. So, logically, you think, you look at it, it makes sense. You look at what the cows are eating, you look at what the cows are leaving behind. The kernels are almost non-existent going in, and they really are non-existent coming out. We still have some passage of cornmeal, but I think the corn silage is pretty much all being digested. So it's been a good experience for us. With any technology, you don't want to be the first adapter, but if it makes sense to you, you better consider it pretty strongly. So that's what we did. We're very happy we did it, and we're looking forward to maybe having a year where starch digestibility in corn is even better. So that's about all I've got. I'm willing to join the panel for questions.
Okay, so we'll have the three speakers come up to the front, please. We're going to basically move the session where people in the audience have a opportunity. We have a cow trial in progress in Cornell, but it's only about 3 weeks in, so we can't give any results. Our packing densities are about the same as the silos, the numbers so far, so it doesn't have a lot. So at this point, Who's got a question? Who's got a question?
I have a question. So, you're the esteemed Dr. Chase, and you're the esteemed Cornell University. Why is it trial? 3 years after this technology's been developed.
We just got a chopper last year that had the unit on it. We haven't changed choppers.
Okay.
Okay? And we were fortunate that we ran 2 plus choppers side by side, same field, at the same time. One with the Shredlage, one with the kernel processor. Scott and his crew. We filled 2 silos all. So that's my relate. That's,
Better late than never.
you're always ahead of the professional. You know that. Okay. Right here.
The conversation has been that you're not so sure about fiber digestibility and looking for starch digestibility or availability. Have you guys looked at fecal starch numbers in comparison?
The question was, this whole fiber digestibility question that I think from a practical standpoint, there is something to it. From a research standpoint, we don't have those answers. And the other part of the question was fecal starches. And the goal on fecal starches, you look at the literature that's out there, is you're maximizing your fecal starch. If you're less, or you're maximizing your starch utilization if you're less than 2% fecal starch. A little bit that I've done on my Shredlage up to this point in time have been running about 0.9 to 1.5, so they've been excellent. What I don't have, shame on me, is what those numbers were before we went to Shredlage, so I don't have a good comparison. All I know is that the numbers I have had thus far have been excellent. My only issue in the Hanahan herd, one of the 3 herds, is every once in a while I get some cornmeal coming through and I have to call the farm's feed supplier and say, you got a hole in the screen and we got to grind cornmeal a little finer. They go out and they find the hole in the screen and we're good the next day when they bring the next load of cornmeal.
I would reiterate what Corwin just said too. I haven't done a lot of fecal starches until this past year, so not very helpful in that either. But as far as he mentioned about, the only really problems are dry corn if it gets out of whack. But most of my producers use high moisture snaplage, so mine tend to have been pretty good.
Now, the units you get, are they only for self-propel or cloth? Because I find out cloth, not available for a full height or...
I know you can buy the Lauren rolls this past year. A couple of main areas bought the rolls as far as to put in, I think that John Deere, Crone, and who's the other? Yeah, New Holland. So I know that you can get those rolls.
Say for a full height or self-propel?
Self-propelled, at least in my area, that's all I saw.
I don't know. It'd be worth a call to the Shredlage company to see about the self-propel. They might be making what they call Lauren rolls for the self-propel, along with for the pull behind, along with the self-propel. If you go to their website, right now the units are just made for Klaas, the Shredlage unit. Okay. If you go to their website and scroll down, you'll see this product called a Lauren roll, and they state right up front there. They put a lot of faith into that set of rolls for processing, but they will not stand by the rolls if you attempt to go to a longer chop length. They're still, the Lauren rolls, you're still at 17 to 19 millimeter chop length. They aren't gonna guarantee anything if you try to lengthen out the chop. So Cliff had mentioned it, and I totally agree. We got to see what the longevity and life of these units is going to be. I know a neighbor farm to the farm that I feed came down at the end of the season. This was after 11, 12,000 ton of corn silage, whatever it was, that got put up, and then 1,000 ton or so of snaplage that had gone through it. And the neighbor farm saw the rolls, saw the unit sitting out by itself, and he asked her, did did you guys buy a new unit? You got a new unit for next year, because Dave was just shocked how little wear he saw compared to what he had been traditionally used to with a standard kernel processing unit. I'm not here to sell Shredlage units, but I believe they are a company that from an engineering standpoint, a mechanical standpoint, they know what they're doing. That's everything that I hear, talk to other people, and what I've seen. That's certainly the impression that I've had up to this point.
The other thing I would add to that is John Deere is taking a little different approach, and they are using their own research and technology, and they have their own kernel processing unit that will be, or is available this year, primarily in the new choppers, the new self-propelleds they're selling. I'm not sure if it's tow behinds as well. But they also, if you bought a new chopper last year, I know they're making a couple of exceptions and allowing people to put them in their relatively new choppers. But if you look at the unit itself, it's a whole lot different than the Shredlage processing. And so kernel processing is what John Deere is going after. They're not really calling it a Shredlage machine. So that's something, if you've got a John Deere unit, you might want to check into as well.
They're mainly focusing on the differential.
Yep.
I know Shredlage has been working on and will be with the new models that John Deere's coming out. They've been working on a Shredlage unit for that one.
Again, logically, that would only make sense. I mean, there's quite a large piece of the market share. If you just work with cloths, you are selling yourself short. So.
Who else has over here?
Yeah, doesn't that cause more of the gut twisting?
Actually, the opposite. Oh, DAs is what she's talking about. As far as would that cause more, and actually it's the opposite. As far as I'm able to have again, back to the visible effective fiber in the diet, and able to feed less carbohydrates, like we were talking, pulling out your corn product here and our dry corn and moisture back home. So I'm able to get as much energy but have a higher forage diet, which is, I mean, ultimately dairy cows are ruminants. So I've seen the opposite.
I would agree with that. The incidence at Mount Upton, since we've been on Shredlage, not that we have very high incidence of DAs before, but I won't say they're non-existent, but they are virtually non-existent.
Corwin and Michelle, is we go to higher corn silage diets, and then if you look at Shredlage and add DMR to it, are you at all worried about reaching a point where to get the fiber levels you need with DMR and Shredlage that you got too high of an acid load of the digestible carbohydrates?
I hope I have those problems. Now, the more forage I can stick in there and reduce my total carbohydrate load, that's why I'm going to put those diets together. This physical NDF question is still one that's very much on my mind, and some of the work that's being done at Miner Institute by Kurt and Rick. Really like to see them do some Shredlage, looking at Shredlage from a PE NDF standpoint. There's no question, I'm still very much focused on where my total forage NDF levels are. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I feel that I've got to put straw back into these diets, and I hope I don't get to that point. I hope that if I feel that my forage NDF or my PE NDF is getting to a concern level, that the answer is I just feed more total forage in the diet and reduce my carbohydrate load and balance things that way.
I agree exactly what he said. I will say I'm not proud of that, but more of my conventional corn silage processed herds this year, I'm feeding a lot less forage than I typically would in a normal year, and they're kind of scary if you look at them. Obviously, as far as I'm constantly monitoring health, and I've done a good job of that, but everybody wants that 99 pounds of milk. So, like I said, I definitely tend to have a lot of higher corn silage diets in my area. I don't think I have anybody below 70%. And merely because of what we talked about in Wisconsin, I'm sure here, every crop's so inconsistent as far as haylage. We try for it not to be, but just Mother Nature. So, like always, you monitor things, but I'm always trying to push them as hard as I can too, at the same time.
There's no question that the lower fiber digestibility, once we got into 2013 corn silage, my 3 shredlage herds have been able to maintain forage levels at a much higher level with good cow performance versus my conventional process. And I have had a lot lower forage diets this year. I hate doing it, but it's the only way I've been able to get milk out of cows.
So having said that, I look forward to the prospects of maybe a more normal year and what that might bring.
I do too. I do too.
Scott?
When you speak of a normal year, generally we call haylage, is our main for main variability in our diet. So we really had a big swing in corn. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I guess what I saw with herds I worked with, Scott, was 2012 corn silage fed great. Cows maintained through the summer of 2013 with poor 2013 haylage because they had the good 2012 corn silage. And then the minute we started feeding 2013 corn silage along with the lousy 2013 haylage, that's when things went downhill. And that's when forage levels dropped in order to maintain milk. So usually you don't, you got one or the other, but boy, we got slammed in 2013 with both the corn silage and the haylages in a lot of cases. Now, I can just speak to the Hanahan farm I work with. I was very fortunate, to their credit, that the 2013 first cutting, they chased 10 days before anybody else. It was one of the few farms that I had really good first cutting haylage to feed. And the subsequent cuttings of 2013, just weather pattern wise and everything, held out pretty well. And I've had better than average haylage compared to a lot of the other 2013 haylages I've had to deal with. So between the shredlage, and a little better haylage, milk has just continued to decline.
So more hay acres, more corn acres, more mass bale slides or higher forage.
We've got 2 different scenarios. So the Saratoga farm, we don't have rocks. Mount Upland farm, they've got a lot of rocks. So a rotation with, obviously, the clean and fall forages is alfalfa. A rotation with alfalfa is difficult and expensive to establish. So unless you really want to pick a lot of rocks and spend a lot of time working cropland to get those established, they're leaning more toward a higher corn silage diet and having less alfalfa in the rotation and just, changing the rotation a little bit. In Saratoga, we have a little better drained soils, and so we've been able to put in really good quality forages, haylage forage, and so like Corwin alluded to, this year, last year, we're actually feeding a little more haylage than I anticipated. So it's a little different scenario, but Mount Upton is definitely moving towards a higher corn silage diet for sure, just for the agronomic reasons and soil type reasons.
The one thing that I do always have the conversation, not that haylage quality isn't important on every farm, because it is. But as we go into these higher and higher corn silage diets, shredlage or just well-processed conventional corn silage, one thing I just continually am having the conversation with my guys about is we're going to harvest less haylage, we're going to feed less haylage, but it has got to be the best quality haylage we can possibly put up. Because the little bit that's in there is, we need it to go a long way. And so my guys are really taking the attitude in a lot of cases of, if that weather window is there, they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of tonnage for quality. And the fact that we're feeding these higher corn silage levels, we can get away with that little less tonnage at haylage and get the quality that we want and put the combination together, and the cows do well.
So I would make a comment and then ask for a comment from Michelle. So one of the things that we've discovered the last 3 years on both dairies is winter crop of triticale or wheat, winter wheat. And it's just been our little secret, but it's not so much a secret anymore. But having cows milk the way they've milked the last 3 summers on this super highly digestible triticale feed, and it feeds cool. I know the nutritionists and a lot of your dairymen know what feeding cool means, but it just doesn't create heat in the rumen, so the cows are able to digest it a lot more readily, and so you can just get a lot higher production level during that summer. So that's one of the things that's been a blessing for us, is to have that triticale component in those diets in the summertime. So what about Wisconsin? Are they going for triticale or?
Not a lot in the lactating herds. I have one that does that. I do use a lot of that in my heifers and my dry cows. That tends to be, we have enough corn silage and haylage, honestly, the last couple of years as far as inventory wise. So that's kind of signed over to them. But one of my dairies we have used in the past for sure.
And the thing I realize, in Wisconsin, they have 2 things going for them alfalfa-wise. Better green soils and this big ball of the sky called the sun, okay? And they just see a whole lot more of it out there for growing good alfalfa than what we ever see here. So it's a little different forage situation from the haylage side. I'll just, one comment to Cliff's talk about triticale. The way to look at triticale when it's harvested for lactating cows, it's BMR with no starch at 16 to 20% protein. When it's put up right, it is firecracker feed for lactating cows. At the Mount Upton farm, we went for close to 8 weeks. We just pulled off of it here a week or 2 ago. We went for 8 weeks. All it was shredlage and triticale silage, no grass or alfalfa, haylage at all. The cows just did super.
So the only other thing I would say is, if New York is truly going to pass Wisconsin as the second dairy state, I'm glad you don't have any triticale being fed.
We have other questions from the audience?
I have a question.
We have another guest speaker.
Okay, time for lunch. No, we have one of the chopper, doing the chopper, we went with a Kiowa processor, Shredlage processor, they did promote it for 1 year, and we've been very satisfied with it, and that's Shredlage, so everybody's looking for one, and it's not an alternative to upfit an existing chopper.
Where is that company out of?
Kiowa, I think, I'm not sure if it's Texas or down that area.
Learn something new every day. This is great.
I've come across that one.
Just one other thing that Michelle did, or maybe Cliff alluded to. Been corresponding with some other private consultants up in the Midwest who have put together some really good data. I believe it as well as any economic data that I think is out there. And this is 2 to 3 years, depending on the farms and custom harvesters that they've been working with. And they're coming up at about $1 premium per ton on the custom harvest cost. That's fuel, slow down time, etc. All their numbers, when they originally started 3 years ago, kind of the number was just thrown out there, like Michelle said, was $2. And they have really tracked this very, very closely. over the last 2 to 3 years across a number of dairies, number of custom harvesters, and the number just keeps coming out to a buck a ton.
So I'd ask if anybody else in the audience is feeding shredlage.
So another herd I feed. My second highest producing herd, Hanahan, still win by a pound or two.
Other questions? Let's give our panelists a hand then.